The great chamber was supposed to be silent. It was a place for quiet words and careful thoughts, for the soft hum of translators and the gentle glow of holograms. The air was always cool, smelling of clean metal and something like old paper. Delegates from 100 worlds floated, or stood, or perched in their places. The Velen, tall and slender like trees made of silver, communicated with soft light patterns on their skin. The Tharks, heavy and many-legged, clicked their claws softly. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, a place of peace that had lasted 1,000 years. The peace was broken by a sound no one could recognize. It was a deep, painful groan that came through the very floor. It was the sound of a ship dying. Every eye, lens, and sensory orb turned to the main viewing portal. Outside, against the velvet black of space dotted with peaceful traffic, a single ship dragged itself into the designated docking bay. It was ugly. It was wrong. Council ships were smooth and graceful, designed to move without effort. This thing was all sharp angles and patched armor. Its gray hull was covered in black scars from weapons fire. Long marks, like claws had scraped across it, gleamed under the lights. One entire side was melted and twisted. From its back, thin trails of smoke or gas or something else leaked into the void. It moved slowly, painfully, as if every bit of its power was gone. This was the human ship, the GCS Dauntless. A murmur, a ripple of shock and fear went through the chamber. The humans? They were a myth, a rumor from the far-off, wild edges of the galaxy. A young, loud species that had somehow gotten their hands on faster-than-light travel, and then, according to reports, immediately started fighting among themselves. The council had watched, had debated, and had decided to wait, to see if they would calm down, to see if they were worth talking to. They had not expected the humans to come here, and certainly not like this. The docking clamp seized the broken ship with a final, echoing thunk that everyone felt in their bones. For a long moment, nothing happened. The chamber held its breath. Then the main airlock of the Dauntless opened, not with the smooth, silent slide of council doors, but with a violent hiss of escaping pressure and the grinding shriek of metal forced to move. 3 figures walked out. They were bipedal, like the Velen, but stockier. They wore not robes or light uniforms, but dark, padded clothes that were stained and torn. The one in front was a man, his face hard, with a fresh cut above his eye. This was Captain Lee Jun. His eyes did not look around in wonder at the grand chamber. They scanned it like a battlefield, noting exits, positions, potential threats. Behind him came a woman, Commander Park Mina. Her black hair was tied back tightly, but strands had escaped and stuck to her sweaty neck. She carried a heavy-looking case in one hand, her other resting near her hip where a weapon might have been. Last was an older man, Ambassador Kim Chul. He moved slowly, carefully, holding a large, sealed data core against his chest with both arms. As if it were a child, they were escorted by a full dozen council sentinels. Their polished armor and energy staffs, a stark contrast to the humans' battered state. But the sentinels did not look like honor guards. They looked like jailers, surrounding the 3 humans, their weapons held ready. The walk from the docking ring to the central floor was long. The eyes of the galaxy were upon them. The humans did not seem to care. They walked with a heavy, tired rhythm, the sound of their boots on the polished floor a steady, foreign beat in the quiet chamber. As they reached the central dais, another sound washed over the council. It was not a sound you heard with your ears, but felt in your stomach. A deep, twisting vibration that came through the soles of the feet and rattled the delicate crystals of the Velen. It was a subspace echo, the ghost of a terrible noise from very far away. It sounded like a giant bell being struck once, and then breaking. Every delegate knew what it was. The last dying scream of a warp core, a starship's heart exploding with enough force to tear a hole in space itself. The echo faded slowly, leaving a profound silence that was somehow worse than the noise. The high speaker, a Velen named Alaris, finally found her voice. It was musical, but now it was tight with strain. You? You come before the Galactic Council, unannounced. Your vessel is damaged. You bring the echoes of violence to our doorstep. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. Ambassador Kim Chol stepped forward. He looked very old and very tired. He placed the data core gently on the speaking podium. When he spoke, his voice was rough, but calm. It was translated for all to hear. I am Kim Chul, designated representative of the United Earth Governance. This is Captain Lee Jun of the vessel Dauntless and Commander Park Mina. We apologize for our condition and for our intrusion. He paused, looking at the faces around him, seeing the fear, the disgust, the curiosity. We are not here to ask for help. We are not here to beg for membership. We are here because the war is over. A new wave of whispers. What war? Captain Lee Jun's voice cut through the whispers, sharp and clear. The war against the Krath swarm. The name alone was enough to freeze the chamber. The Krath were a nightmare from the dark between galaxies, a biological horror that consumed worlds. The Council's policy for centuries had been containment. They built great watchtowers and silent alarms on the galactic rim, hoping the swarm would pass them by. They never spoke of it to younger species. It was a secret fear. You lie, hissed the Thark's ambassador, Grok, his claws clicking angrily. The swarm is contained in the Zelphin Nebula, 100 light years from your claimed territories. Commander Park Mina looked at him. Her eyes were dark and held no warmth. Your containment failed 63 years ago, she said flatly. A tendril broke through. It found our first colony, Eden Prime. It found us. She gestured to the data core. This is not a request for a hearing. This is a casualty report and a declaration of victory. The audacity of it, the sheer, brutal claim, left them speechless. These broken creatures, arriving in a broken ship, speaking of defeating the Council's oldest, quietest terror? Show us, Pilaris said, her light patterns flashing with uneasy colors. Kim Chol nodded. He pressed his hand to the data core. It glowed, and a hologram, sharp and clear, erupted above them. It did not show ships in neat formations or diplomatic meetings. It showed a city on fire. A human city. People who looked like Lee Jun and Park Mina were running, screaming, falling, and over them, moving with terrible speed, were the Krath. They were worse than the old Council records showed, larger, more vicious. Their chitinous bodies wet and gleaming under a dying sun dot, the footage jumped. It showed soldiers in dark armor, like the humans wore now, fighting in the ruins. A young soldier, his name tag reading Choi Hyun, was firing a rifle until it glowed red hot. He was shouting, waving people behind him into a tunnel. A Krath limb, like a giant blade, shot from the smoke and struck him. The image cut before he fell, but the sound of his final shout hung in the air of the silent council. Scene after scene. Pitiful human starships, small and clumsy, throwing themselves at the larger Krath bioships. Space battles that were not elegant dances of energy weapons, but brutal, close-range brawls of metal and flesh and explosive shells. They saw humans sacrificing their own ships, ramming them into Krath carriers. They saw a world, a beautiful blue-green world, not unlike Council core worlds, being slowly covered in a gray, pulsing Krath hive structure. The final recording was a ship's bridge. It was the bridge of the Dauntless, but it was whole, clean. Captain Lee Jun, looking younger, but just as hard, sat in the command chair. Alarms were blaring. Lights were flashing red. All batteries are gone. Hull integrity at 12%, a voice reported. On the main screen, a massive Croft mothership, a planet killer, filled the view. June's face was calm. Set a collision course. Take us right into its primary reactor spire. He looked at someone off-screen, maybe Park Mina. Activate the warp core overload. Set it for 30 seconds after impact. Let's make a door they can't close. The recording showed a blur of motion, of final orders given quietly. Then the view of the mothership growing larger and larger until the screen was filled with its horrible living detail. Then static, and they all understood. The echo they had felt, the deep breaking bell sound that had vibrated through the chamber as the humans walked in. That was the sound of the Dauntless dying. That was the sound of Captain Lee June's final order. That was the explosion they had felt. The hologram faded. The three humans stood in the bright, clean light of the council. The smoke from their ship still curled in the docking bay behind them. The ghost of a world-ending battle still rang in the silent air. Kim Chul spoke into the terrible quiet. The swarm's central mind is dead. Its fleet is broken. The war that you did not know was being fought is over. We are what is left. He looked around the circle of stunned alien faces. We are here to tell you how the galaxy has changed. The silence that followed Ambassador Kim Chul's words was thick and heavy. It was the silence of 1,000 assumptions being shattered all at once. The elegant Velan delegates had gone perfectly still, their soft light patterns frozen in shades of shocked gray. The Tharks clicked their claws in a slow, uneasy rhythm, a sound like breaking bones. The chamber, a monument to calm debate, now felt like a tomb. Captain Lee June did not move. He stood like a rock in the center of the dais, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes still performing that slow, constant scan of the room. He saw the fear on the alien faces, but also something else. Denial. Commander Park Mina stood beside him, her posture straight but not rigid. She looked tired, a deep tiredness that went beyond the body and into the soul. She watched the council, her dark eyes missing nothing, understanding their reaction perfectly. The high speaker Ilaris was the first to find her voice again. The musical quality was gone, replaced by a thin, strained tone. A victory? You claim to have defeated the Krath Swarm? A single young species? This footage. It could be fabricated. A dramatic story to force your way into this council. A murmur of agreement rose from several sections. The idea was comforting. It was easier to believe these rough creatures were liars than to believe their own long, peaceful history had been a failure of duty. Kim Chul did not argue. He simply nodded, a small, weary motion. I understand your doubt. We would doubt, too, in your place. He touched the data core again. The proof is not in a single battle. It is in the 23 years of war that came before it. The war you did not see. New images bloomed above them. These were not the sharp, official recordings from ship bridges. These were grainy, shaky, taken from helmet cameras or broken surveillance systems. They were far more terrible. The council saw the first contact. A human survey team on a green, lush moon. They were scientists, their tools for taking soil samples lying in the grass. Then the sky darkened. A Krath spore ship, silent and organic, descended. What came out was not the large warriors from the first video. These were smaller, faster, like metallic insects the size of dogs. They overwhelmed the scientists in seconds. The last image was from a fallen helmet, looking up at a clawed foot rising out of frame. Then black. Eden Prime Colony, first outbreak. Park Mina's voice stated flatly. We lost contact. We sent a military escort to investigate. They did not return. The scene changed. A human city, not burning yet, but under a strange gray rain. It was spores settling on buildings, on streets, on people who stumbled and choked. Where they landed, a slick, pulsating organic material began to grow, consuming concrete and metal, and flesh to make more of itself. We had no energy shields, no biofilters for our atmosphere, said Li Jun, his voice a low rumble. We had to burn it, to burn the infection and everything it touched. The hologram showed planes dropping fire on suburbs. Soldiers in basic protective gear, not the advanced armor they saw later, walking through streets of ash, putting down the twitching, half-formed craft growths with flamethrowers. The humans watching in the council saw the horror on the faces of those soldiers. They were not warriors yet. They were frightened people doing a terrible thing to survive. Your containment, Kim Chol said, looking at the FARC's ambassador, Grok, did not just fail. It was never built where we lived. We were on the other side of it. We were the buffer. And you did not warn us. The accusation hung in the air. Unanswered. The story unfolded in brutal snippets. They saw the first, pathetic human warships, old orbital freighters welded with missile pods, being torn apart by craft biovessels. They saw the desperation that followed, the conversion of asteroid miners into warships, of passenger liners into troop carriers. They saw the unification, as old human nations and factions, still arguing over borders on Earth, suddenly faced with an enemy that had no borders, only hunger. The footage showed fierce, angry debates in underground bunkers, leaders screaming at each other, until a map was brought up showing the spreading red stain of Kroth conquest. Then the screaming stopped. The arguments turned to logistics, to weapons production, to conscription. We learned, Parkmina said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Their ships were organic. They healed damage. Our energy weapons were weak, just scratches. So we used kinetic weapons. Solid metal moving very, very fast. The hologram showed a new design of human ship, ugly and blocky, firing solid tungsten rods. The rods punched through the craft hulls and kept going, leaving holes that did not close. They were faster than us in open space, Li Jun added. So we never fought in open space. We ambushed them. We lured them into asteroid fields. We hid in the radiation of dead stars. We fought in the ruins of our own colonies because we knew the ground. They saw a battle in a broken city. Human soldiers, not in uniform but in scavenged pieces of armor, moved through blown-out buildings. They used the craft's size against them, leading the larger warriors into narrow streets where they could be trapped and bombed from above. They used rubble and ruin as weapons. It was ugly, brutal, and effective. A Velen delegate stood, her light patterns flashing in disgust. This is savagery. You fight like animals. You destroy your own worlds to win. Li Jun turned his head slowly to look at her. Yes, he said, the words simple and final. We did. Would you prefer we fought politely? And lost? The delegate had no answer. The final series of images was the most difficult to watch. It was the lead-up to the battle they had already seen the end of. It showed the human fleet, every ship they could muster, gathered near a gas giant called Hades' Gate. The Kroth Armada was there too, a swirling mass of living ships 10 times their size. The human strategy was not a grand, heroic charge. It was a trap. They used the gas giant's magnetic field to hide their movements. They sacrificed a third of their fleet as a distraction, letting the Kroth engulf them, while the rest, including the Dauntless, flanked around to reach the mothership. They saw the faces of the captains on the distraction fleet. They saw a woman, Captain Li Su-jin, smiling sadly as she gave the order to hold position. They saw her ship, the GCS Phoenix, surrounded and pulled apart by craft tentacles. The transmission ended with static. The hologram zoomed in on the Dauntless in its final run. The audio was filled with the shouts of the crew, the screams of metal, the panic of alarms. Through it all, Captain June's voice was a calm, steady center. Shields are down. Port engine is gone. Keep the nose on target. Everyone else to the escape pods, now. Sir, the pods won't clear the blast radius in time, Park Mina's voice replied. A pause. Understood. Then we see it through together. Arm the core overload. The image shook violently. The view of the mothership grew until its horrible, fleshy details filled the screen. Then, the recording from the Dauntless ended, returning to the silent council chamber. Kim Shul let the silence stretch. He looked very old in the cool light. You speak of savagery, he said, not to the Velen, but to the whole council. You see only the violence. What you do not see is the choice. The choice between death and a different kind of death. We chose the death that meant something. For 23 years, every day, we made that choice. The Krath did not want our resources or our territory. They wanted to make us into nothing, into them. So we fought with everything, with fire, with metal, with our hands in the dark. We are not proud of the savagery. We are only proud that we are still here to be ashamed of it. He placed both hands on the podium. The war is over. The swarm is broken. We are not a story. We are not a lie. We are the survivors. And we are here. He looked around, meeting the eyes of the stunned galaxy. The question for this council is not if our story is true. Your own long-range sensors can confirm the silence from the Krath zones. The question is what you will do with the people who made that silence. The silence after Kim Chul's final words did not last. It shattered into 100 different reactions, a storm of noise that filled the grand chamber. The calm, orderly space of the Galactic Council was gone. It was now a place of chaos. The Valen, Alaris at their front, were the first to speak with formal anger. Her light patterns shone a cold, offended blue. What you describe is not a victory, she said, her musical voice sharp. It is a tragedy layered upon a crime. You have contaminated entire worlds with uncontrolled fire and radiation. You have practiced a form of warfare this body outlawed millennia ago, total war, with no regard for the ecosystem or for your own cultural preservation. You come here, bringing the psychic echoes of this butchery, and ask for a seat? She gestured with a long, slender hand toward the battered Dauntless, still visible through the portal. You are not diplomats. You are carriers of a disease. The disease of violence. A rumble of agreement came from many quarters. The idea was taking hold. The humans were not heroes. They were a problem. A dangerous, unstable problem. The Thark's ambassador Grok heaved his large body forward. His voice was a grinding, clicking sound, translated into words. The speaker is correct. Your actions, while perhaps necessary for your survival, demonstrate a profound lack of control. You are a young species, ruled by passion and fear. The Krath were a known threat, a contained threat. Your reckless engagement may have stirred the entire swarm. You may have drawn them toward civilized space. He pointed a thick claw at Li Jun. Your final act was a warp core detonation of immense yield. Do you know what that does to subspace? To the fabric of space itself? It is an act of vandalism on a cosmic scale. Captain Li Jun listened, his face like stone. Only a small muscle in his jaw moved, tightening and relaxing. He did not look at Grok. He looked at the stars beyond the portal. It was Commander Park Mina who responded. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the grumbling. You contained them. She let the word hang. You built a fence. And when the wolf got out on our side of the fence, You closed your windows and pretended not to hear the screaming. For 23 years. She turned her dark eyes to Grok. Is it reckless to fight a wolf with your teeth when you have no gun? Or is it reckless to have a gun and not warn your neighbors the wolf is loose? Grok's claws clicked angrily, but he had no reply. A new voice joined, smooth and logical. It was from the Tellarite delegate, a stout, gray-skinned being named Krog. The Tellarites were known for their engineering and their pragmatic, unsentimental view of the galaxy. The philosophical debate is secondary, Krog stated. The practical matter is this. They claim the swarm is broken. This is a significant strategic change. We must verify. Until we do, they are a potential hazard. I move that the humans and their vessel be placed under immediate quarantine. Their data core will be confiscated for analysis by council scientists. They will remain in a holding facility until the threat is assessed. The word quarantine echoed. It was not a request. It was a polite word for a prison cell. Ambassador Kim Chul's shoulders sagged, but not in defeat. It was in a kind of weary expectation. He had known this would come. He opened his mouth to speak, but Captain June spoke first. June's voice was low, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. No. Everyone stared at him. One did not simply say no to a council motion. Your quarantine will not hold us. June continued, looking now at Krog. Our ship is damaged, but its core systems are intact. Its weapons are depleted, but its engines are not. My engineer, Kang Bei, has them ready. We did not come here to be prisoners. We came to deliver a message. The message is delivered. Ilaris drew herself up. You are in council space. You will abide by council law. Your law did not protect us, June said. Why should it bind us? The tension in the room became physical. The sentinels around the dais tightened their grip on their energy staffs. The humans did not reach for weapons. They had been disarmed, but Park Mina shifted her stance slightly, ready to move. Li Jun did not move at all. He was a man who had faced the end of the universe. A dozen guards were not a threat to him. They were an obstacle. Kim Chol raised a hand, a placating gesture to his own people as much as to the council. Please, a moment. He looked old and tired, but his eyes were clear. You speak of quarantine, of analysis. You see us as a specimen or a bomb. You do not see us as a people. Let us show you the people. He operated the data core once more. The horrific battle footage vanished. In its place were simpler images. They saw a makeshift classroom in an asteroid base. Children, their faces thin but clean, sitting at desks, learning mathematics from a screen. A teacher, a woman named Yoon Ji-hai, pointed to equations, her voice calm and steady. They saw a factory deep underground. Workers, men and women covered in grime, assembling the solid steel shells for the railgun rounds. They worked with tired determination, passing parts along a line. One worker, an older man named Park Jin, paused to adjust a machine with careful, skilled hands. They saw a field inside a vast biodome. It was not earth food growing, but a fast-growing, nutritious fungus. A young woman, Kim Soo-kyung, moved between the racks, checking humidity levels. She touched one of the growths gently, a small, tender gesture. This is how we fought, Kim Chul said softly. Not just with ships and guns. With teachers. With mechanics. With farmers. Every person had a role. We did not have the luxury of a society where only soldiers fight. We were all soldiers. Even the children fought, by learning, by staying alive, by being the reason we could not give up. He changed the image again. It was a list. A long, endless list of names, scrolling slowly upwards. Names in Korean Hanjul, in English, in dozens of human languages. "These are the names we have recovered so far," Kim Chol said. His voice cracked, just once. "From Eden Prime, from Hades Gate, from 100 battles on a dozen worlds. This is the price of your containment." The list scrolled on and on. A silent river of loss in the bright chamber. The angry speeches had died. The outrage was choked off by the sheer, quiet scale of the list. Even Grok looked away, his clicking subdued. It was Alaris who broke the silence this time, her voice quieter, but still firm. "Your suffering is acknowledged, but it does not change the facts. Your methods are a danger. Your presence is a destabilizing force. You are wounded, and wounded animals are unpredictable. Quarantine is for your own study, and for our safety. It is the only logical path." Pragmatism had reasserted itself, dressed now in the clothes of mercy. "It is for your own good." Commander Park Mina looked at Ilaris, and for the first time, a flash of pure, hot anger showed in her eyes. It was gone in a second, replaced by icy calm. "You keep calling us animals," she said. "You talk of our wounds. You are right. We are wounded. But we are the ones who walked here. Our ship is broken, but it flew. Our people are gone, but we are still here. You offer us a cage and call it safety. We have spent a generation in a cage of fire and loss. We did not come all this way for a bigger one." She took a step forward, ignoring the sentinels who stiffened. "You want logic? Here is logic. The Krath are broken. The force that broke them is standing before you. You can try to put that force in a box, or you can try to understand it, but you do not get to pretend it does not exist." She looked at Krog, the Tellarite. "You moved for quarantine. I moved for something else. Scan the Krath vector. Use your long-range sensors. Do it now. Verify our claim. Then decide if you are speaking to criminals, or to the ones who cleaned up a mess you are too afraid to touch." The challenge hung in the air. It was a direct, simple dare. Stop talking. Start looking. Ambassador Krog studied Park Mina, then Captain June, then the old ambassador. He saw no bluff. He saw only the weary certainty of people who had already seen the worst and had nothing left to hide. He turned to Ilaris and gave a short, sharp nod. Ilaris hesitated. The script was broken. The humans were not following it. They were not pleading. They were not bargaining. They were demanding to be seen as real. Finally, she gestured to a nearby aide. "Dispatch a deep-range probe to the coordinates of Hades Gate. Priority scan. Report the findings to this chamber immediately." The order was given. A wait began. The council delegates talked amongst themselves in low, tense whispers. The humans stood silently on their dais, an island of battered resolve in a sea of uncertain fear. They waited, not like prisoners, but like judges. And for the first time, the members of the Galactic Council began to feel, deep in their bones, that they were the ones being measured. The wait was not long in terms of minutes, but it felt like an age. The Grand Chamber had lost its sense of timeless order. Now it felt like a waiting room before a verdict. The hushed conversations of the delegates were like the rustle of dry leaves. The three humans stood silently, a still point in the uneasy room. Captain Li Jun had not moved. Commander Park Mina had her eyes closed, but she was not resting. She was listening. Ambassador Kim Chul leaned lightly on the podium, watching the faces of the council, reading the fear and the doubt. The Tellarite, Krog, was busy at his console. His thick fingers moved quickly, pulling data from the council's vast sensor network. He was a practical being. He did not care about philosophy or fear. He cared about facts. And the facts were starting to come in. Deep range scan initiated, a neutral computer voice announced. Passive sensors only. Probing the region known as Hades Gate, adjacent to human-designated space. A new hologram appeared, smaller, above Krog's station. It showed a map of space. One section was marked with the cold blue symbols of council space. A vast empty gulf labeled Containment Zone separated it from a blurry red-tinted area, the Krath Vector. And on the far side of that red area, a small, blinking green dot, human space. The containment buffer remains intact, Ilaris said, some relief in her voice. No swarm signatures have crossed, but the vector itself. Krog muttered, his brow furrowed. He input more commands. Full spectrum analysis. Scanning for biosigns, energy emissions, quantum noise. The room watched the holographic map. The red-tinted Krath vector was usually a swirling, angry mass of signals on their scans, the psychic and biological noise of a trillion swarm entities. It was a constant low-grade horror on their sensors, which they monitored from a very safe distance. The scan swept across the sector. It moved slowly, painting the map with new data .silence where there should have been the chaotic, pulsing red of Krath hive mind activity. There was gray, not the black of empty space, but the gray of absence, the gray of nothing. The scan moved further. Energy signatures? Krog asked the computer. Detecting residual thermal and radiation patterns consistent with extremely high-yield matter-antimatter detonations, the voice replied. Multiple events. Scale. Catastrophic. No ongoing energy readings. No warp signatures. No directed emissions. A Thark scientist leaned in, her claws clicking rapidly on her own console. Bioskins. Where are the bioskins? The map updated. The bioscan looked for the unique, complex patterns of Krath organic technology. It was the scan that always came back a solid, terrifying block of red. This time, it came back scattered. Flickers of fading life signs, isolated and weak. No unified pattern. No central hive signal. Just fragments. Echoes of life. Dying out. It's not possible, the Thark scientist whispered, the translation carrying her shock. They said they killed the central mind, Krog said, his voice flat. The data suggests a massive systemic collapse. The swarm is not moving. It is decaying. A new kind of quiet fell over the chamber. It was not the quiet of anger or debate. It was the quiet of awe and of deep, unsettling fear. The unthinkable was true. The monster under the galaxy's bed was gone. And these 3 battered humans from a broken ship had done it. Alaris the Velen looked from the horrifying gray map to the humans. Her light patterns swirled in confused, muted colors. The foundation of their policy for centuries was gone. What did that mean? It was then that a new channel lit up on the main communication hub. It was a type beam encrypted signal, flagged with both Tellarite and human identifiers. Krog looked at it, surprised. He had not authorized this. He opened the channel. A new hologram appeared, larger. It showed the interior of a Tellarite vessel, a scout ship. Next to the Tellarite captain stood a human woman in a simple engineering uniform, her hair tied back, her face smudged with grease. Her namatag said Song Ji-woo. Apologies for the interruption, counselors, the Tellarite captain said, his voice crisp. This is Captain Vorik of the Tellarite Scout Vessel Vigilant. We are in the Hades Gate sector, operating under a mutually agreed upon reconnaissance protocol with the human remnants. Agreed upon? By whom? Ilaris demanded. By me, said Commander Parkmina, opening her eyes. She addressed the chamber. While you debated our quarantine, we opened a secure channel to the Tellarite border fleet. We offered them a live feed. We offered them coordinates. We had nothing left to hide, and they were curious. On the hologram, Dr. Song spoke. Her voice was calm, academic. The data is conclusive. The Kraft Hive node network shows zero coordination. We are detecting only autonomous, isolated clades. They are consuming each other. It is a terminal cascade failure. She gestured to her screen. The trigger appears to have been the simultaneous destruction of the primary mothership, and at least 7 secondary synaptic hubs. The method was kinetic bombardment followed by catastrophic warp core implosion. The shock wave through the psychic network was absolute. She was describing, in cold scientific terms, the murder of a galactic-scale consciousness. Captain Vorik took over. Visual confirmation is possible. We are approaching the coordinates of the final engagement. Sending feed now. The main hologram shifted. It showed the view from the Vigilance forward sensors. There was no glorious battlefield. There was only wreckage. A vast, silent field of broken, organic shapes floated against the stars. The shattered pieces of the Krath mothership, now just frozen, dead flesh and chitin. Among the pieces drifted the unmistakable, angular wreckage of human ships. A broken wing here, a shattered engine bell there, and in the center, a distortion in space itself, a faint, shimmering scar where the Dauntless had torn reality apart. It was a graveyard. It was proof. By the stars, a delegate whispered. The weight of the evidence settled on the chamber. The humans had not lied. Their story, their brutal, terrible story, was the truth. The Council was now faced with a new, raw reality. The balance of power, which had rested on the quiet, contained fear of the Krath, had just been tipped over by a species they considered children. Krog, the Tellarite, leaned back. He looked at Li Jun, then at Parkmina. His pragmatic mind was already moving past the horror to the implications. Your weapons, he said. The kinetics. The railguns. Your engineers? They improvise? Li Jun gave a single, slow nod. Our lead engineer on the Dauntless was Kong Day. He could make a targeting computer from a waste reclaimer and a power cell. We did not have your particle beams. We had physics. Mass times acceleration. It is a simple law. Simple, Krog echoed. A species that used simple laws to break a galaxy-level threat. He looked at the human wreckage among the Krath dead. They had not won with superior technology. They had won with sheer, brutal determination and a willingness to apply basic force in the most efficient way possible, by aiming it at the enemy's brain and pulling the trigger, no matter the cost. Ilaris found her voice again, but the certainty was gone. It was replaced by a hollow confusion. This changes things, but it does not change everything. Your nature remains. Your victory was born from violence. That violence is now part of you. How can we trust that it will not be turned on others? Kim Chol finally spoke again. He looked exhausted, but his voice was gentle. You think we love war? You think we enjoy this? He gestured to the holographic graveyard. That is our blood floating there too. Our children. Our friends. We know the cost of violence better than any species in this room. We carry it in our bones. You fear we will bring war. We only just finished ours. What we bring is a warning and a question. He paused, looking at each of them. The warning is that the universe is not as safe as you hoped. The question is this: now that you know the fence is not enough, what will you do? Will you learn to build a stronger fence? Or will you learn to walk outside it? The chamber had no answer. The comfortable, ancient script of containment and quiet fear was burnt to ashes. The humans stood before them, not as petitioners, not as prisoners, but as a mirror. And in that mirror, the Galactic Council saw its own reflection. Peaceful, advanced, and utterly unprepared for a universe that did not follow its rules. The debate was over. The facts were in. Now came the much harder part, deciding what came next. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the leaders of the galaxy had no idea what to do. The graveyard hologram hovered in the center of the chamber, a silent monument to a truth too large to ignore. The comfortable words of the council quarantine, savagery, instability, lay in ashes around them. The evidence was undeniable. The humans had done the impossible. Now the room held its breath, waiting for what came next. High, Speaker Alaris looked from the silent wreckage to the three unmoving humans. Her light patterns flickered with unreadable colors. The old path, the safe path of rules and containment, was gone. She had to say something, to reassert some control. The findings are conclusive, she said, the words tasting strange. The Galactic Council acknowledges the cessation of the Krath swarm threat, and your role in it. It was the barest minimum of recognition, but it was a stone dropped in a pond. Ripples spread. The Thark's ambassador, Grok, shifted his great weight. The anger was gone from his clicks, replaced by a wary calculation. Acknowledgement is one thing. Integration is another. Your methods are a toxin to orderly civilization. We propose a new status, Protectorate. You will be given aid to rebuild your worlds under Council supervision. Your military capacities will be integrated into a joint defense force under our command. This is a generous offer. It provides safety for you and security for us. It was a new cage, a prettier one, with words like generous and safety, but a cage all the same. They would be taken apart, their hard-won strength diluted and controlled. Captain Li Jun did not even look at Grok. He looked past him to the stars. We are not orphans, he said, his voice quiet but final. We do not need guardians. Commander Park Mina's lips thinned. Your joint defense force failed to defend us. Why would we place our safety in its hands now? Before Grok could reply, a new sound filled the chamber. An urgent priority ping from the communication network. A visual feed activated without ceremony. It was the bridge of the Tellarite scout ship Vigilant, but the view was different. It was shaking. Captain Vorik's face was tense. Council, we have an update. The human wreckage field is not entirely inert. We are detecting a localized resurgence. A Krathclade, isolated but large, has reactivated. It is consuming the wreckage, building itself into a new bioship. It is on an intercept course for the nearest Council outpost Sentinel Station Alpha. A new window opened, showing the sensor data. A pulsing red mass was indeed coalescing from the debris, growing larger by the second. It was a smaller threat, but a threat all the same. And it was heading directly for a Council station of 5,000 souls. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through the chamber. Procedures were invoked. The distant Council defense fleet was alerted that they were hours away. Sentinel Station Alpha had only light patrol vessels. They began evacuation calls. Galeris turned, her light patterns flashing in distress. Ambassador Krog, your nearest vessel? The Vigilant is only a scout ship. Its weapons are for show. We cannot engage, Krog said, his voice tight with frustration. He looked at the humans, a sudden, terrible thought dawning on his face. Li Jun was already moving. He stepped to the edge of the dais, ignoring the sentinels. Captain Vorik, this is Captain Li Jun. What is the composition of the clade? Is it forming a synaptic node? Vorik, surprised, checked his scans. Affirmative. A rudimentary one, but yes. Why? June turned to face the Council. A Krath swarm is a mind. Cut off the head, the body dies. But if a piece of the body starts growing a new head, you must cut it off again, immediately. He looked at Krog. Your ship has a maneuvering engine. And a communications laser. It is not a weapon. Krog insisted. Everything is a weapon, Arkmina said. Stepping beside June, you just have to use it right. She looked at June and gave a small, sharp nod. June spoke to Vorik again. His voice now the clear, calm voice of a captain in battle. Captain Vorik, we are transmitting a targeting solution in an engine burn sequence. You will use your laser to blind the clade's primary sensory cluster. Then you will execute the burn. You will ram the forming synaptic node. A gasp went through the council. A suicide order. On the screen, Vorik paled. But then Dr. Song-Ji Woo, the human engineer, pushed into view. The calculations are sound, Captain, she said, her voice cool and professional. The node is unstable. A high-velocity impact of sufficient mass will trigger a chain reaction in its nascent bioreactor. It will not survive. Your ship's rear sections may have a 17% chance of remaining intact if you eject the core module at the last microsecond. It was not a reassurance. It was a statistic. Vorik looked from the human on his bridge to the human on the council screen. He saw no plea in Li Jun's eyes, only certainty. He saw the data, the cold math of survival and sacrifice. He was Tellarite. He understood logic. He looked at the panic-stricken faces of the council, who had no solution. He made a decision. Transmit the sequence, Vorik said, his voice grim. We will comply. Belay that. Ilaris cried. You cannot order a council vessel to its destruction. He is not giving an order, Kim Chul said, his voice suddenly strong. He looked very old, and very sad, and very proud. He is offering a tactic. The captain is choosing to use it. It is the difference between a command and an alliance. We would not know. The chamber watched, utterly helpless, as the data was sent. On the hologram, they saw the small, brave vigilant turn toward the growing red mass. A weak laser flashed out, striking a specific, pulsing organ on the Kroth-clade. The mass shuddered, confused. Then, the Tellarite ship's engines flared to maximum, a brilliant blue-white star. It accelerated, a silent arrow flying toward the heart of the enemy. No one breathed. The impact was not a fiery explosion. It was a wet, green burst of bioluminescent fluid. Then, a series of smaller, internal detonations as the chain reaction took hold. The red mass on the sensor screen flared brightly and then dissolved into scattered, fading motes. The vigilant was gone. A small, tumbling debris field, the ejected core module, drifted away from the expanding cloud of Kroth remains. The threat to Sentinel Station Alpha was over. It had taken less than 3 minutes. The silence in the council chamber was absolute. It was a silence of profound shame and of awe. The humans had not just won their own war. They had, without permission, without a seat, without a fleet, just won a battle in council space. They had used a scout ship as a bomb and a scientist as a strategist. They had seen a solution where the council saw only death. Li Jun turned slowly to face the stunned assembly. The battle echo was finally gone from his eyes. In its place was something harder, the clear, unyielding light of a new dawn. We did not come to join your choir, he said, his words falling like stones. We came to ensure it still has a song to sing. You offered us a cage or a leash. We do not accept. Our methods are not a toxin. They are the medicine you did not have. The swarm is gone. We remain. He looked at Ilaris, at Grok, at Krog. Our seat is not a gift for you to give. It is a fact for you to accept. It is a reckoning. Ambassador Kim Chul stepped forward one last time. He placed his hand on the data core. All we have, all we know of the craft, of our war, of our survival, we will share. Not as subjects, not as children, as equals, who have paid the price in blood that this room has only imagined. He looked around the circle of ancient, powerful species. The vote is not whether to admit humanity. The vote is whether you are wise enough to recognize that the galaxy is changed, and whether you will change with it. There was no more debate. There were no more speeches. The procedural lights for a vote glowed in the air. One by one, the delegates voted. It was not unanimous. Many votes were cast with trembling hands or hesitant clicks. But light after light turned green dot when it was done. Alaris, her light dimmed, spoke the verdict. The Galactic Council recognizes the United Earth governance as a sovereign member state, with all attendant rights and responsibilities. The words echoed, but they felt small. The real event had already happened. It had happened in the fire of Hades Gate, in the silence of the gray sensor scans, and in the courage of a Tellarite captain who had listened to a human idea. The three humans, the captain, the soldier, the ambassador nodded once. It was not a smile. It was an acknowledgement. They turned and walked back the way they came, past the silent sentinels, who now stood not as guards, but as witnesses. They walked toward their broken, beautiful ship, ready to go home. The day humanity arrived at the Galactic Council was over, and the echoes of the battle they brought with them had finally, forever, changed the sound of peace.